When we get into difficult periods of our lives, we're often advised to count our blessings. There's a great old hymn with that name, count your blessings, count them one by one. And it's certainly good advice. But it can also be highly damaging advice, depending on the circumstances. Last week, when talking with Liz Walker about her Can We Talk program that helps people who've experienced trauma, we learned that one key to the program's success is a caring and listening presence. It's very much not telling those who are suffering to kind of snap out of it and just count your blessings. We might consider that question an exercise for ourselves, but offering that advice to those in distress can be received as judgment and minimizing their pain. And they will most likely resent us for it, even if we happen to be right that they could indeed benefit by counting their blessings. Romans 12 invites us to weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. Being able to do that is one of the best ways to ensure successful relationships of any and every kind. But the potential for making people hold us at arm's length in our relationships is not the only danger lurking in the count your blessings advice. Because even when we're applying the concept to ourselves, by responding to good fortune, as we so often do with, I am so blessed, I have this blessing and that blessing, and look, I've counted 45 blessings just this morning. We're implying that our good fortune is a sign of God's blessing. And that's not wrong exactly, but seeing our blessings as gifts from God to be tallied up, to be counted as a measure of God's favor for us, creates a direct line to the cruel attitude of believing that those who don't have what we do have arrived at that condition because God has withheld blessings from them because for some reason they don't deserve it. And therefore, we are justified in withholding blessings from them too. The entire concept of God's grace is that God gives to us, all of us, regardless of merit. We don't have to apply and be approved for God's blessings. And we proclaim that every time we take communion. Any good work we do is meant to be a joyous response to what we have already been given, not grudging or anxious payment for what we hope to receive. The I have 106 blessings, how many do you have way of thinking doesn't lead us to an understanding of God's grace. But while counting our blessings can be problematic, recognizing God's blessings in our lives is key to a life of faith and discipleship at individual, corporate, and civic levels. So, how do we talk about God's blessings without landing in the prosperity gospel holier-than-thou trap? That's what I want to try to pry out of God's call to Abraham in Genesis 12. It's a famous passage that marks the beginning of three monotheistic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All three religions trace their origins to this one man and this faithful response to God's call that Neil just read at the beginning of Genesis 12. God's call to Abraham, or Abram as he's known here at the beginning, God changes his name a bit later, commands him to take a great leap of faith to leave the only home he has ever known and to venture to some place that he has never been. But God doesn't just command a hard thing. With the command comes a promise of blessing. And we immediately see that blessing as a reward for Abram agreeing to take that risk, as payment for his faithfulness. But listen to what God actually says to Abram. Quote, "I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." The blessing is not a reward for Abram's faithfulness. The blessing is actually part of the call itself. Blessing is the particular work that God is calling Abram to do. Blessing is the person God is calling Abram to be. And by being the blessing, to make sure that the blessings of God are spread to all the families of the earth. And so God sends him out from his home city and his own people to go live among the Canaanites to get that project started. That mandate is then repeated to Abraham's son Isaac and then to his son Jacob, who, as we saw in September, did not deserve such an honor even just a little bit. It's very similar to Jesus telling his disciples, all themselves descendants of Abraham, that after his ascension, they are to spread the gospel to the rest of Judea, not just Jerusalem, and then to Samaria, the land of their enemies at that time, and then to the ends of the earth. The mandate has never changed. The blessing of God's love is meant for all the families of the earth. And that is accomplished by giving all the families of the earth the experience of God's unconditional blessing, by being that blessing ourselves, by channeling God's blessing out to them through us. We are blessed by God in order that we might be a blessing to others. Counting our blessings without then asking how God would like us to use those blessings misses the mark by a pretty wide margin. It's not that we can't partake in the blessings as individuals. They are given to us, but they are not given only to us. The closest analogy I can come up with is that it's like sitting at dinner at Thanksgiving with serving bowls heaped with food filling the center of the table. When the host picks up a big bowl of mashed potatoes and hands it to us, we are invited to take some for ourselves. But we are then expected to hand the bowl to the person next to us. Sharing from the feast at the table is the fundamental expectation, and the person who gets the bowl first is no more honored or blessed by the host than the person who gets it at the other end of the chain. Further, if one particular person always takes so much of the potatoes that those who get the bowl later have little to nothing, a good host is going to start circulating the bowl in the other direction. And if the first person gets the bowl of potatoes, puts it down on their plate and says, "Wow, I am so blessed," and just eats it all, dinner invitations are going to be scarce for that person going forward. And yet, that's what most of us do. God's blessings frequently come to us when we're not physically present with others in the way we are around a dinner table. We can see our own full plate and count every blessing on it, but we can't always see the empty plates of others. or even who the specific person is that might need a blessing shared with them. That's obvious around a physical table in a home, but often not in other areas of life. When I first moved to North Central Florida in the late 1980s, I was shocked that there could be homes with dirt floors right next to the well-manicured homes of the wealthy. When I asked questions, I learned what zoning was all about. Everything where I grew up in Rhode Island, even in very rural areas, which is where I was zoned so that the poor and the rich did not live near enough to see each other. Florida was very much zoned for racial segregation, as were the zoning laws where I grew up in Rhode Island. But in Florida, I didn't have to leave my street to know whose plate was empty at the table. And this was especially true in Cross City, where the first church was that I served. I remember one of the girls in our youth group, I will call her Sandy, who begged me to come to her house to see her new bunk beds. She was 14, and she was so excited about her new bunk beds. So I went. I carefully climbed up the combination of hand-placed cinder blocks and boards to get in her front door, and Sandy led me to the bedroom she shared with her younger sister. There were the new bunks. A family member had built them, unstained, untreated plywood boards, one on top of the other. No bedding, no mattresses. Sandy told me, still very excited, how they were allowed to bring the couch cushions into their new bunks to sleep at night. And she felt very blessed. Sandy and others in that youth group also made me, and good thing you're already seated for this, they also made me excited to cook for them. And as most of you know, those aren't words that usually come out of my mouth. Cooking and entertaining others is one of the highest anxiety-producing things I am ever asked to do. But with those kids, it was different. I did not have much. My salary was $24,000 a year, and sometimes while serving there, I went hungry myself. But the youth group met at the parsonage, and when Sandy saw the things in my cupboard, she was beside herself. "Canned peas," she shouted. "They're so good. We never get canned peas at my house." Another girl was looking in another cupboard and SpaghettiOs. Oh my goodness. And soon, those who went hungry more often than I did were seated around the parsonage table, laughing and sharing and filling up on canned peas and SpaghettiOs like it was a 5-star Michelin restaurant. With the lens pulled back to physically see the others at the table, I didn't suddenly look around the house and think, wow, I'm so blessed. Instead, it was like learning that I had always assumed the bowl of mashed potatoes was only for me and had just eaten it. A couple of years later, one of those girls was moving out on her own, and she literally had no dinnerware at all. I had 2 sets of plates, and I couldn't get rid of that second set fast enough to that girl who had none. I went from, wow, God has blessed me with 2 sets of plates, to, oh my goodness, what am I doing with 2 sets of plates when somebody else has none? It was the switch away from counting my blessings to recognizing that God had blessed me in order that I might be a blessing to others. Now, I hope that doesn't come across as some kind of virtue signaling, because passing the mashed potatoes to the next person is not a virtue, as the host of any dinner will tell you. You don't get a gold star for passing the mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving. I'm just trying to illustrate how our views and behaviors can shift When we actually know and see all those who share our world as children of God, just as we are. And if we can't see them, we should ask, why can't we see them? And make the effort to both improve our vision and to change systems that make others invisible to us. God's blessings are the resources God gives us to fulfill our calling. And therefore, they are one of the biggest clues to our calling itself in any given time and place. And the basic calling for all those who look to Abraham as a spiritual or physical ancestor is to spread the blessings we are given until all the families of the earth are blessed. The particular emphasis that the Abrahamic religions bring to the world, and that is laid out in the calling of Abraham, is that God works in this world not for us, but through us. We are the ones responsible for ensuring that God's abundance is shared by all the families of the earth. When we turn to God and say, God, why do you let people starve? It's a wonder God doesn't just smite us on the spot. That's like a company's director of marketing going to the CEO and saying, sir, why isn't our product selling? And the CEO's like, yeah, you tell me. Being a conduit for God's blessings, getting to all the families of the earth, is our job. God has provided the blessings to share. God is the host of the meal. We were handed the full bowl of mashed potatoes. But it's the job of each of us to take what we need from that bowl and to keep on passing it around until all have enough. From the minute God picked up Adam by the collar and plunked him down in the garden in Genesis 2:15 and said, here, you're in charge. Serve and protect the earth. It has been our job to make sure no one went hungry, that no living thing went extinct, that the waters of the earth were always clean enough to drink, and the air was always healthy and invigorating to breathe. We are the stewards of God's creation, from every blade of grass to every sparrow to every human to all the families of the earth. In the end, this all goes back to the notion of stewardship. Nothing we have is ours, not our money or our possessions, not our family or our bodies. It's all God's, and we are the trustees of God's possessions. God treats us very well as trustees. We get good stipends. We are greatly blessed. But like with Abraham, the whole point of God's blessing is to share it. A blessing is a responsibility. Our response to a blessing is not meant to be, oh, wow, look what I got. It's meant to be, oh, wow, I wonder how God is calling me to use this. It's true of our possessions, but it's also true of our talents. God has blessed me with a talent for writing. Some of that blessing I use myself. It helps me communicate and make a living. But I know that my talent is given to me for a purpose beyond myself. And so I also give of my talent to others, in books and sermons and devotions and letters of recommendation and helping others communicate what they want to say. In that way, others are blessed, and that helps others better use their own different blessings for still others. God has blessed many in this church with amazing musical gifts. Because they have shared them with us, we have been blessed by that blessing. And some have pursued their own musical gifts outside the church, which blesses even more. Some share their teaching gifts or administrative gifts or the wonderful blessing of just showing up and helping wherever is needed, like at the fair on Saturday. Just saying. God has blessed you. Count your blessings if that's what helps you recognize them. But do not stop there. The particular blessings you have received are strong clues to your calling. We are all blessed to be a blessing. We are given particular gifts so that God can put them to use for the world. God's intention is that all the families of the earth should be blessed by the actions of God's people. It's our job, and it has been since Genesis. And Jesus reiterated that the Easter evening in John, as he says, "As the Father sent me, so I send you." Job passed. Don't hoard it, spread it. Don't pay it back, pay it forward. For every material blessing you have received, for the gift of talent or health or land or a kind and loving spirit, whatever it is, you were given that blessing in order that you might find joy and sustenance in it. You get to put some of those potatoes on your plate, yes you do, but then use it to bless others. The family of a friend of mine has a tradition of sharing a single dessert, which then becomes a game. And depending how many people there are, it might be a whole bunch of desserts. But the first person takes a bite of whatever it is, and then passes that dessert, sends that one bite to the next person. And that might be happening at several places around the table. And then the next person takes a bite and passes it around the table. And they just keep doing that. But there is a single rule. If you eat the last bite of any dessert, you lose. Now, that can get really wildly silly as you get down to the final crumbs of a piece of cake and somebody's trying to take one crumb so that they have to, it's like a Jenga tower sort of there at the end. So it's fun and kind of, like I said, silly at the end. But the lesson it teaches, if you don't leave something for someone else, you lose, is spot on. Because a blessing, being a blessing to others, is also a blessing to us. When we are not a blessing to others, we too lose. Among children, one toy lovingly and willingly shared creates community and friendships. One toy hoarded creates tears and temper tantrums. Wealth and resources that are lovingly and willingly shared creates a grateful and peaceful world. Wealth and resources that are stockpiled and hoarded leads to poverty and war. For those who look to Abraham or to the Bible for guidance, it couldn't be more clear. Enjoy God's blessings. Count them one by one. And then pass the potatoes. Pass the bread and the wine until all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Amen.